Hi, this is Lawrence Sanek with Castle Dream Real Estate, the company that helps sellers and buyers capture the dream in the greater Tampa area. Castle Dream Real Estate is bringing you Home Buyer Episode 14, Why Do We Need a Home Appraisal? Well, let's get started why a home appraisal is required. 1. Some facts about residential real estate appraisals. In Bankrate's annual closing cost survey, the average appraisal costs around $400. Depending on the size and complexity of the home, this can go up. Buyers sometimes pay for the appraisal when it takes place, and other times the fee is included in the closing cost paid on settlement day, the day the actual closing takes place. Many lenders, though, are now asking for a credit card to pay for the appraisal up front. If the transaction is not completed, the buyer will still be responsible for the costs, as this is part of the expense a buyer incurs in the home buying process. 2. Appraisals are an important part of your buying transaction. A real estate appraisal helps to establish a property's market value, the likely sales price it would bring if offered in an open and competitive real estate market. Your lender will require an appraisal when you ask to use a home or other real estate as security for the loan, because it wants to make sure that the property will sell for at least the amount of money it is lending. Don't confuse a comparative market analysis, or CMA, with an appraisal. Real estate agents use CMAs to help home sellers determine a realistic asking price. Experienced agents often come very close to an appraisal price with their CMAs, but an appraiser's report is much more detailed, and it is the only valuation report a bank will consider when deciding whether or not to lend the money. 3. About appraisers and appraisals. Appraisers are licensed by individual states after completing coursework and internship hours that familiarize them with their real estate markets. The lender might use an appraiser on its staff or contract with an independent appraiser. If you are allowed to choose an appraiser and it isn't someone the lender is familiar with, the results might be subject to review before they are accepted. The appraiser should be an objective third party, someone who has no financial or other connection to any person involved in the transaction. The property being appraised is called the subject property. You will probably pay for the appraisal when you apply for your loan. 4. What you'll see on a residential appraisal report. Appraisals are very detailed reports, but here are a few things they include. Details about the subject property, along with side-by-side comparisons of 3 similar properties. An evaluation of the overall real estate market in the area. Statements about issues the appraiser feels are harmful to the property's value, such as poor access to the property, possibly the roof has to be replaced, or other items that will be determined by the appraiser. Notations about seriously flawed characteristics such as a crumbling foundation, an estimate of the average sales time for the property, what type of area the home is in, development, standalone acreage, etc. 5. Residential appraisal methods. There are 2 common appraisal methods used for residential property. 6. The sales comparison approach. The appraiser estimates a subject property's market value by comparing it to similar properties that have sold in the area. The properties used are called comparables or comps. No 2 properties are exactly alike, so the appraiser must compare the comps to the subject property, making paperwork adjustments to the comps in order to make their features more in line with the subject's property. The result is a figure that shows what each comp would have sold for if it had the same components as the subject. 7. The cost approach. The cost approach is most useful for new properties where the costs to build are known. The appraiser estimates how much it would cost to replace the structure if it were destroyed. 8. So what does the appraisal mean to you? Your personal approval is accomplished early in the loan process, but final loan commitment usually hinges on a satisfactory appraisal. The bank wants to be sure its investments is covered in case you default on a loan. If the property appraises lower than the sales price, loan might be declined, but that isn't the only hurdle it must pass. Other facts on the appraisal can be a problem too, like the bank probably won't like it if the estimated time to sell the property is longer than the area average. If the appraiser notes that entry to the property is from a private shared road, the bank might want to see a road maintenance agreement signed by everyone who uses the road, verifying the maintenance is shared by all parties. Those are just a few examples of negatives that could stall your purchase. The lender will study the appraisal carefully before determining whether or not the property qualifies to serve as a security for a loan. 9. An appraisal isn't a home inspection. Appraisers make notations about obvious problems they see, but they are not home inspectors. They do not test appliances, look at the roof, check the chimney if applicable, or do any other typical home inspection tasks that an inspector would do. Never count on an appraisal to help you determine if the home is in good condition. 10. If the appraisal comes in low. Don't panic if the appraisal comes in low, because there are often steps you can take. We'll talk about solutions for low appraisals further down in the podcast. If the appraisal uncovers other problems, remember, most problems are correctable. Try to keep your cool and work through issues one step at a time. 11. Solutions for low appraisals. Don't panic if the appraisal comes in low. It's tough to remain calm when it appears the pending sale will fall apart, but both parties have options. 12. Buyer can make up the difference in cash. The lender cares about the appraisal only to the extent it affects the loan-to-value ratio. A low appraisal does not mean the lender won't lend. It means the lender will make a loan based on the ratio agreed to in the contract at the appraised value. 13. The seller can lower the price. If the home is overpriced or the value is inflated, often it is the best solution. It makes the buyer happy and the lender is satisfied. There is no guarantee that if the buyer walks away, the seller won't receive a low appraisal from the second buyer's lender, not to mention the time and trouble it takes to sell the property again. Sometimes a bird in a hand is best. 14. The seller can offer to carry a second mortgage for the difference. If the buyer really wants the home but cannot come up with the difference in cash, making payments or a lump sum payment at a later date to the seller is an option. After the escrow closes, sellers often retain the right to discount the second mortgage, sell it for less than face value to the investor. 15. Order a second appraisal. First, if your loan is an FHA loan, ask the lender for a list of approved appraisers. Either the seller or the buyer can pay for the second appraisal. Sometimes the second appraisal will come in higher than the first, especially if the first appraiser was inexperienced, made mistakes, or was not familiar with the local market. If your loan is a conventional loan, then it is subject to the rules of the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, also known as the HVCC. Barb Torres, an accredited senior appraiser, stated, as soon as the parties find an appraiser is coming out who is not familiar with the local market, they should have the lender request another appraiser that is familiar with the local market. 16. Supply a list of comparable sales. Ask the agents involved to put together a list of recent comparable sales that justify the agreed-to sales price. Submit that list to the underwriter and ask for a review of the appraisal. Also ask the buyer's agent to call the listing agents of pending sales to try to find out the actual sales price of those properties. Listing agents do not have to disclose the sales price, but some may be happy to help out because they could find themselves in the same situation. The final sales price on any transaction should be found on the county website for the county the property is in, but it is usually about 30 days after the completion of the transaction. 17. Cancel the transaction. Many purchase contracts contain a loan contingency. If the appraisal comes in low, the buyer does not qualify to buy the property at the agreed-to terms in the contract. A properly written loan contingency allows the buyer to cancel the contract and requires the seller to release the buyer's earnest money deposit. If the purchase is a cash purchase, I would suggest an appraisal contingency so the buyer can decide if they want to move forward and complete the transaction if the appraisal comes in below the agreed-to price. Thank you for listening to Homebuyer Episode 14, Why You Need a Home Appraisal. We're grateful for the time you've taken to listen to this podcast, and we really do look forward to your input on what you would really like to hear about in future podcasts. You can find the show notes at homesellerhomebuyer.com, and you can leave your comments, questions, and suggestions there, or email us at info@homesellerhomebuyer.com. Don't forget to contact Castle Dream Real Estate at info@castledreamrealestate.com so you can capture the dream of buying or selling property in the greater Tampa area. Tell your family, friends, and coworkers about Home Seller Home Buyer. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Home Seller Home Buyer, and catch us on the next episode. Thank you for listening, and stay informed.